All right, so it is 7:14 on the 8th of April 2020, and this is episode 6 of Tea House Settings. This is our first episode where we've got a guest on. Do you want to introduce yourself, Will?
Yeah.
Not ourselves, not everyone.
Introduce us.
Introduce us as well, Will, if you want.
I'll introduce Sonny Mamon and Sticky High. Hello, I'm Will. I'm just one of Ant's boys from first year of uni.
One of the OGs.
And, I'm a big lefty socialist. I'm gonna give my opinion on things.
Yeah, we're kind of just gonna have a nice little talk.
Great, sounds great. I'm excited for this one. So, Will, tell us a little bit more about what do you study? If you
I study international politics.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, what sort of subjects are you big on inside the course?
It's a massive variety of things. So you get a lot of choice, which is good, but a lot of foreign relations, that kind of thing. Like at the minute, one of my main assignments is I have to fucking advise the US government on what to do with the Iranian nuclear regime, which is, just simple little things like that. Not a big deal. Not a big deal.
Mate, you sound more like a spy than a student. Right?
It's half and half, innit?
Oh yeah.
Well, that sounds good, man.
I do. I'm hoping to be a journalist one day, so it's interesting for that kind of thing. So.
And that's the thing.
Okay, so that's what you sort of want to go into.
This is like really interesting because this is like my first time doing anything like this, like just sort of raw, unedited, like sort of just talking about things. So
you gotta be careful what you say, mate.
Yeah, this is uncut.
You gotta be careful what you say. Well, I'm happy that this is your first experience and that we can provide this to you.
That's good. Do you want to tell us a bit about your YouTube page as well, Will?
Well, that's kind of the early days of my journalism career, I guess. I've only got 2 videos on there at the minute. Just generally about politics. One was about the Independent Group. I don't know if you remember that from like 1.5 years ago now, when a few Labour MPs left the party.
I do remember that, yeah.
And, yeah. So I made a video then because I was obviously fuming that anyone would hate on my boy Jeremy Corbyn like that, but
what's your whole opinion on Jeremy Corbyn stepping down then as Labour leader?
I mean, it had to happen, innit? After what happened, but I'm just of the age where that man, who knows, if he hadn't come into power when he did, then I might never have got into politics. Like, there's so many people of my age, my generation, who are just inspired by everything that he stands for, everything that he represents, and I will always look up to him, and I'm convinced that even though he's, ridiculed at the minute, history will look back on him very favourably as one of the only sane people in this crazy, crazy time that we live in.
Why do you think he is? He has been ridiculed and has been portrayed in the way he is.
It's interesting, but I guess I don't know. You got to look at the media. I think is the main reason. I mean, you've got a media industry in this country and in America, for example, that's just completely bankrolled by the establishment, by corporations, by the likes of Jeff Bezos. And all these people who have a lot of money and they like the way things are at the minute. And when someone like Jeremy Corbyn comes along and threatens to change all of that, of course, they're going to have something to say about it, and they're going to do everything they can to prevent that person from getting power. So,
of course, yeah.
That's the thing. The media is so powerful within kind of like the kind of everyone's perception of the world, really, because it's the thing that people sit down and they watch the family, and it's just something that can corrupt minds so easily, especially if they can only fester within the community they surround themselves with, which is really interesting. No, 100%. But did you see that kind of stuff? Like, they were doing loads of stuff where they were kind of saying Jeremy Corbyn was so far on the other side, or so far on the other side of the spectrum. He was a communist. He was this. He was that. He was an anti-Semite. He was
a fascist. Yeah. I heard he was a fascist quite a lot. My nan told me he was a fascist. which I thought was
yeah,
pretty
mate, my
funny.
nan said that. My nan
Seems as my nan only gets her information from certain news sources and never really leaves the house. So I imagine why she. I don't know why.
It's the exact same with my nan as well. Like, example, she was like saying, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn's like Hitler," and I was like, "What do you mean, like Hitler? What do you mean?"
Not many people are like Hitler.
So. But yeah, no, it's very, very interesting. What was the other video one anyway, Will?
Well, that was the first one was quite short. It was kind of just like a thing that I rushed out in a day to kind of just get something done. It was like the first thing I ever made really in that kind of aspect. But the second one was a longer video about sort of like the whole anti-Semitism issue. That was probably, I think I released that in like November of last year.
Oh, nice. What's your kind of stance on that?
Anti-Semitism inside.
On the video was called "Is the Left Anti-Semitic?" It's like 26 minutes long, so it was. I spent quite a while on it. Like it was the process of like a few months of script writing and research and that kind of thing.
And stuff. Wow. So, could you take us through the history of why sort of that idea exists and what you think about it?
It's such a complex issue because there is undoubtedly on all sides of the political spectrum instances of anti-Semitism. Like anti-Semitism exists in all walks of life, whether that's on the right, whether that's on the left. And I think it's important, even though I do take the stance that the likes of Jeremy Corbyn is not anti-Semitic, there are people who support him who will be anti-Semitic. And there are a range of reasons for that. I kind of go into that in the video. I kind of talk about how you've got the whole Israel-Palestine thing. A lot of people on the left are very sympathetic towards Palestine and that kind of conflict. And in some cases, that will lead some of those people to
believe certain aspects, of what is associated with it. No, I agree. I agree. And we'll leave all the information so everyone can go watch the videos in wherever it is. We'll put it wherever we can. But just going back to that point where you're saying people are getting judged around their supporters almost, it's kind of like a stupid aspect to kind of agree with, because if you just look at any range of people, the people that kind of follow on for it can put their own spin on it or have their own beliefs to it. It's not the words that I say are directly impacting the people that are talking. It's not my words. My representation of what I say might be different for you than it is for what I meant to say. If you know what I mean, people can twist.
What you mean, like how you interpret
exactly.
it?
People can twist and manifest what you're saying to believe whatever they want from it, really. And that's why people can use things.
So very much how ISIS use the Quran.
Yeah, 100%. And then people say they're Muslim terrorists, even though that it's people that are completely blinded and they're just pushed forward. And this is the religion is what is kind of like the escape route or the common goat, the kind of thing that they go towards to kind of point the blame onto, if you get what I mean, scapegoat, if you will. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Stick, you bloody outside, mate. I can hear all the birds. Can
you actually hear birds?
It sounds like you're in a rainforest.
It's ambient.
I'll go. Shall I go inside?
I don't mind. I'll survive.
Wait, let me try and hide the bird.
I thought you said you were going to try and take out the birds, mate.
I'll shoot the birds down. So moving on anyway to something that's a bit more today. Birds, bats, not too different from bats.
Winged creatures, yeah.
Bats, winged creatures that maybe created this COVID-19 virus that's going on in the world right now. And I know we spoke about it on the last podcast, but things seem to be changing in the world
basis,
right now.
It really is.
It is on a daily basis. England is just about plateauing, like Will said before the episode started, which is probably a good thing. Well, definitely a good thing. I mean, it'd be better if it was going down. But China have just about opened up Wuhan again. And the doors are open, and shops are reopening, and everything. So their isolation is.
I found something
over.
really interesting, bro. Apparently, in China, what they're doing is they're still tracking and monitoring where every single person is going to make sure they know who they're interacting with. They know who they're kind of associating themselves with. They have to track all their information through their phones and social networks and everything like that. So they're still, I would say, still under isolation in terms of they're still allowed to go outside and they're still able to be as free as they want to. But I was looking at something earlier, and it was I think it was 7 out of the top 10 countries with the most CCTV camera zones are in China. So, yeah. So the top one, there are, I think it was something like 14 people to every one. In that's the thing. The 2 countries that are outside of it, or the 3 countries that are outside of it, are one's London, and the other one is Atlanta in Georgia, USA. In London, there are, I think it's 16 people to every camera. And in China, in the top country in China, there's 6 people to every 1 camera.
That's insane.
Insane. They're estimating by the year 2022 that there's going to be 2 cameras for every 1 person in China.
Jesus Christ. But the thing is, we saw that video where in China, they're not just cameras, they're like facial recognition, motion tracking cameras that can recognize you even like if you've got like a scarf on. Like they realize they can track your face, and they can like zoom in properly into like millimeters into your face and track where you are, where you've been in that day, and everything.
And it's
absolutely
all
everything.
associated with the national bank and the national rating system that they've got. I heard things like if you eat food on public transport, your social rating goes down.
Jesus Christ. But there was also that thing where, like that Black Mirror episode where you get judged whether you like took them, like you weren't allowed to use planes, and boats and go on holiday and stuff if your social record wasn't good enough. Or like if you like, I don't know, fell asleep in the bus or something, you'd lose points or stuff like that. Like how crazy is that?
Even other stuff like they track your internet habits, and if you're doing excessive online gaming, it reduces your score. It's a ridiculous thing.
Crazy. That is crazy.
Like stuff that's actually almost terrifying in itself.
Life's becoming an episode of Black Mirror.
It is. In China, it is. But we kind of gone off the topic of what coronavirus was, but it's kind of it's a scary concept because we're all talking about what was happening after coronavirus and the after effects of everything that's happening here. I don't know, Will, what's your opinion on it?
Well, the difficulty is we can look at China and say, obviously, they're a lot further along. If you look at it, the most graphs that try and document the cases or the deaths, China is much further along because they had months before it reached the rest of the world. So they're much further along on their graph. But you also have to realize that as an authoritarian regime, they are probably the best, the country that is the best equipped to handle something like this. Like you say, they've got all of this facial recognition technology, and they can properly force people to go into lockdown. Whereas over here, like as much as there is a lockdown on at the minute, like I see, gangs of kids on bikes going past the window, and they don't live in the same household. They're just meeting up with their mates, and I'm sure they are trying to. A lot of them are trying to distance themselves from each other. But at the end of the day, there's still lots of people flouting the lockdown rules, whereas in China, that is not the case. If you do that over there, you'd be arrested. The same thing happens in Russia. Like, people are getting 5-year jail sentences for flouting the lockdown. That's just, like, compared to over here, it's ridiculous. So, like, we do not have the mechanisms to enforce a lockdown in the same way.
No, that's totally right. I heard in Russia you're not allowed to leave your house even to do sport or exercise, and you're not allowed to leave your house further than 100 meters away, and you're encouraged to do like online deliveries for everything. Like you're not even supposed to leave the house to go shopping.
Wow, that's crazy.
Whereas in England, like we said about on the last episode, I've suffered the quarantine in France, which was super strict from the start. And like for weeks and even like today, I've seen stories of people on Instagram who are still meeting up with their mates, like you said, Will, going out for this, like buying beers, going and sitting in parks and stuff. I saw a picture of London Fields that was like this weekend where there was like hundreds of people walking around, like skateboarding or on bikes. And it's just like, whereas in China, yes, it was 6 weeks or 2 months, but in England, it will be 6 months if people don't try and stay isolated.
Do you guys think that China was actually completely honest with every bit of information that they tried to give out? Or do you think they were hiding the amount of people that died and actually got the infections?
That is definitely...
a lot of videos.
Sorry. You go, sorry.
No, it's just only because I was saying, I've seen videos and evidence of people getting welded into their own houses in China. just to stop the spread of the disease. Welded into their houses. Welded into their houses. That's what I'm saying.
What?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't know the hows and whats and whys of what happened in China, right? All I know is that they're not isolating anymore. So they obviously did something right, you know, because all we want all everyone wants at the moment is to be able to go outside and resume normal life, you know. Whereas, I mean, it's crazy to think about literally the whole world's on standby right now, you know, nothing's working. So obviously everyone wants to be able to return to normal life, but I don't know. I feel like China were the first one, so obviously they probably suffered the most. But America has far surpassed China now in terms of cases and deaths.
Yeah, definitely. The thing is with China as well, as much as they are lifting the lockdown, that's in terms of people being able to go outside. But you have to look at also like the kind of businesses that are allowed to open. For example, I think it's movie theaters is the example that I've seen in a lot of news articles. In China, they closed a lot of the movie theaters. When the outbreak got bad, and then slowly as the numbers started to come down, they reopened them, and then it peaks straight away. So I don't know if it's like a cultural thing, like maybe movie theaters are a big thing in China, so and obviously it's a lot of people in a enclosed environment, so it's easy to spread. But they opened, I think, movie theaters for like one weekend, and then boom, the number shot back up again, and they've closed them again. So as much as people are out and about, even if that happens here,
like the normal life.
Yeah, exactly. Resumed, so we might get maybe a month of summer, maybe it might get to like July or August where the lockdown is eased, but pubs aren't going to be open. And movie theaters over here won't be open. All of these kind of still put big, large
looks
gatherings.
Like I'm out of a job then. But to be fair, like you said, man, China's life is slowly coming back to normal, which is great for them, and congratulations, because they've obviously done something right, even if they did do something wrong to begin with. Everyone was eating bat soup. But England and I think all of Europe, and especially America, we're not having a summer.
Yeah.
I know for a fact we're not having a summer, and they're saying 2 weeks at a time, right? It's already been a month for me here. It'll be 6 weeks. It'll be 8 weeks easily. I reckon in a month's time there'll be even more restrictions. Macron is speaking on the telly Thursday night, so tomorrow night, and I think he's gonna make the thing like 2 more weeks, and I think they'll just do that every 2 weeks.
It's a better way to kind of approach it, isn't it? Where it's kind of just being like, this is where we're seeing it now. This is the approach to doing, because it's going to give false hope to people. When Donald Trump turned around and was like, "This is going to be done by Easter," everyone's going to be like, "Oh, fuck it, man! It's just going to be light work, whatever's happening." And then when it doesn't happen, it just causes more.
But no one wants to say straight away. No one wants to say straight away we're going to be locked down for 3 months, 4 months, even though that's probably the most likely thing that's going to happen.
The thing that I found really interesting, though, was we still don't know the long-term effects of these disorders, the long-term effects of this virus. We've never kind of in our lifetimes, or never in our parents' lifetimes, seen something so contagious and so easily spread, and how it can almost be no symptoms for certain individuals. There might be something like it could return over a certain period of time. It might be something that stays in your system, something like herpes, where it only comes back every certain amount of time, where we kind of have to sit back and hide back into our homes every couple of years just to kind of go for it.
But I think there is examples of people who have severe symptoms from this, like severe pneumonia, and actually do have long-term lung damage from this. I think that is something that is being observed in China. I'm not sure how widespread it is, but you've also got to look at other factors like smoking and that kind of thing.
Everything, being diabetic, being hypertension, high blood pressure, all these things are things that elevate your chances of actually getting more pain with the disease, really, more a serious condition, if you will.
How about the people who had SARS in like 2002? Has any of them survived and lived to tell the tale today?
I think a few of them did, actually, because I saw there was a few.
So maybe it would be interesting to look at people who contracted SARS at the time to see how they were affected, or like even people who, if people survived from Ebola or things like that, just to see, these new diseases that we're not too used to see the long-term effects. Because I've heard multiple people, and I know someone who in France who actually had COVID, and but like very mildly, but now has been struggling to taste and smell.
Right.
So I feel like things like that can be long-term effects of the disease, even though they're like minor, but they're very severe, like in your lifetime, you know. And it could even be worse than that. So those are the sort of things that we don't know yet, that we won't know. And I mean, we can base ourselves off people who've got pneumonia and everything and who've lived with pneumonia, but I think this is very different because this is so sudden.
And the thing is, pneumonia is just a condition that can occur because it's like almost pooling of secretions within the lungs. It's very different because the disease itself is causing pneumonia, but pneumonia is somewhat easy to treat. It's a fairly simple condition. All you can really do is give them extra oxygen to be able to help the dissipation of oxygen into the lungs. But the disease itself is something that happens, and in reality 99% of diseases or viruses that we get, once we become immune to it, we have antibodies in our system that are able to fight the disorder. But again, it's just something that's so far-fetched. And you were saying, having a look at, I think SARS is a bit more similar, but Ebola is a completely different disease to it. So being able to track the long-term conditions of those is very, very hard to kind of compare and contrast.
It's hard to compare them. Yeah.
But I don't know, from a political standpoint anyway, I don't know how the government can react to it anyway if this kind of stuff does happen, because it's affected the economy so much anyway that people.
How has it affected the economy so far, and how will it continue to? Do you know?
Well, from what I've seen for myself, you can just assume it has. If you look at the amount of people that are on furlough, which is people that are getting paid even though they're not doing the jobs they need to because they can't, simply due to the fact that the virus is occurring, it's affecting. Think about, look, you don't have a job anymore because of what's happening. Everyone around me, the only people that I know that have a job are people that have been working in the industry for a number of years. My dad's been working on National Rail for 20 odd years and been working in his current role for 5 years. So he's got his job and he's still continuing with it because it's something that's necessary. But all essential work just seems to be pushed over to the side, all hospitality work and everything like that. And that generates a lot of revenue for a lot of people. So
definitely.
So I don't know what's happening. Has anyone looked at the kind of legislations that they put in place to see what's happening about COVID?
Well, I heard you get paid 80% of your wage. I mean, like we spoke about last time, the thing where you get paid 80% of your wages if you earn less than less than 2,400.
No, that's what it was. But I was thinking just more in terms of the fact of how they're going to support businesses, because I heard that they were able to give people £25,000 grants to small or medium-sized businesses to kind of help support them in this time, and then they can apply for loans with 0% interest that can kind of help them in the long term. But I don't know, like it was stuff like when Boris Johnson, and I think we discussed this on the last one as well, when he turned around and said, I don't want people to go to businesses. We're not going to shut them, but I just don't want people to go to them. There are so many businesses that are kind of almost sitting on a knife edge anyway, living on a week by week basis. Yeah. They're turning around and being like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But we'll just push it off to the side. There must have been a numerous amount of businesses that went under because of that. And that's the government's fault in reality.
You think they should have closed down everything the next day and implemented something where they can still continue to pay them rather than dissuade everyone from going to the places?
Yeah, 100%.
That only made people suffer from it, of course.
Exactly, and it didn't help anything, did it? But saying that in
do you think that?
No, I was going to say in I think it's Switzerland, or it was one of the Scandinavian countries. It might be Norway or something. They turned around and they were like, they were doing what England have said this whole time that they were going to do. So they've just been like, no, just try not to go to these places. We're going to keep it all open, but try not to go to these places.
Sweden that's doing that.
Yeah, in Sweden. There we are. There you go. Have you read about it, Will?
Well, I've seen a lot of people talking about it, but I haven't actually seen actual.
What's your opinion on the approach of it?
I mean, it's hard to tell at the minute because until we actually, the thing is with the virus, it's so hard to look at things in real time and say what's working and what's not because of the way that the virus works. You have a 5-day incubation period where people have no symptoms at all. They think they're fine, but that's when they're most contagious. And so you can look at it and then you can look at the stats each day coming out. You know, they have the Twitter account that tweets each day. The government, I think it's the Department of Health or whatever it is that tweets the numbers every day. That's only so useful because you've got, people by that point, even though that's the number for that day, each person has spread it to a number of other people. And it's kind of like, you have to look at it in like 5-day gaps. So you have to look at it like you would look at the previous 5 days rather than looking at today or waiting for the night time to come and find out what the results were from that day. You have to look at it in terms of like consecutive days and look for trends, look for patterns. And that's why they're looking at now why it's plateauing is because it's been about 2 weeks. I'm not sure exactly how long it's been. Has it been about 2 weeks since the lockdown was announced?
I know it's been about. It's been just over a month since the first death occurred. In the UK, so it's probably been about 3 weeks.
So that's the case. Like, the illness tends to last about 2 or 3 weeks. So that's why we're only starting to see it plateau now, even though the lockdown's been in state for like the last 2 or 3 weeks. The numbers kept on going up and up and up, and it's only now, after a few weeks of that we're seeing the results. So it's such a hard. So even if we did look at what's happening in Sweden right now, you can only tell so much by looking at what's happening now. And in 2 weeks' time, then we'll really understand what's happening now. Like in terms of 2 weeks' time in the future, we'll look back and be like, that's when we'll be able to look back at Sweden and be like, okay, comparatively to the UK, for example, they had way more infections or way less or whatever the case may be. So it's really hard to sort of analyze these things in the present, which is what makes it so susceptible to misinformation and all these kind of things, panic on social media, all of this kind of thing it's a real-time situation that's just evolving. As every day there's new news. There's they've just built this massive hospital down in London, the Nightingale thing,
I've seen that.
Now they're saying chances are that place will never be full because they're looking at the way that the virus kind of worsens in severe cases and saying the majority of people who go into it, not the majority, I think it's 50% roughly of people who go into intensive care die anyway. So they want to make,
I didn't hear that stat.
They want to make sure that they're not just putting people on ventilators that are going to die regardless, because then that is using up resources for people that could use that to actually survive, which is such a horrible predicament to be put in as a doctor. I can't imagine what it's like
100%.
to be working in the NHS at a time like this.
Mate, and literally having to turn around and be like, we have to save these ventilators for the younger individuals. Yeah. So if someone that's coming in, where the people that are more susceptible to getting serious conditions from these diseases end up not being able to get the treatment that they need. But it's fortunate to hear from what you said that the Nightingale Hospital is never, well, the predictions are that it's never going to be full.
Yeah.
But you never know. Even things like the thing that we were talking about before in London Fields, where there was a huge spike of people going out. I don't want to think about how many people probably ended up getting infected simply due to that day alone.
Exactly. There's been so many individual mistakes. I mean, if you look at the Liverpool game, Anfield, how many Spain at that point was already in the middle of an absolute nightmare. That was just as it was starting to get bad in Spain, and you had 3,000 Atletico Madrid fans, and Madrid as well, the epicenter of the outbreak in Spain, coming over here. And going to the bars on Merseyside, these places that are the most susceptible to spreading, because everyone's having the same glasses, they're not getting washed properly, everyone's drinking from the same taps, everyone's touching the same surfaces, everyone's drunk. Like that
I find it so no completely, and it's so weird to look at now, looking back on it, because everyone used to be okay being able to touch bars and when you're going to public places, use the public restrooms and touch the public restrooms, touch the taps. And now it's almost like it's taboo to do that. It's kind of almost terrifying to look at that, isn't it? Where you're like, I watch videos of like mass gatherings. I saw a video that one of my friends had when he went to Mecca, and everyone was walking around, and I was like almost gobsmacked about the sheer amount of people that were there, and thinking how quickly, if COVID was there at that time, how quickly it would spread. It's a very weird time.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like masses, for example, like church gatherings. Can you imagine? All these things are just completely on hold. Like there's been nothing like this And people keep comparing it to the Blitz,
fucking...
and it's like the Blitz was different because, you know, it was a case of you had to turn off all your lights at nighttime and that kind of thing, and that was different. It's like a virus. As much as, you know, we need to have that spirit of togetherness, I understand that that's the main kind of reason why people are making these comparisons to like the wartime period, but it's so different. It's about individual actions. It's about, you know, not going out unless you absolutely have to. It's not about just, you know, manning up and persevering and all this kind of nonsense. It's just it's such a scary
that's
situation.
The thing that I'm thinking of. Yeah, completely. Like, if you just think about it in terms of when this is all said and done and we look back onto it, how do you want to remember yourself in this time? Would you want to look at yourself and be like, oh, look, I was just out with my mates getting fucking pissed, having a good time, we're going to the parks? Or I was like, no, I did what I had to do. I had to do my part and stay inside and help people that I needed to go around and deliver food to these people or wherever it is. And it's just selfishness at the end of the day, isn't it?
It definitely is.
A couple of my mates are like that, and we've all kind of, it's almost got to a joke now where it's just like, oh, look at you, you fucking spreader, you fucking Captain Spreader over here, fucking spreading over to everyone and shit like that.
It's true, you have to say these things, like, as much as it's, and especially it's painful when it's your friends. Like, you know, I don't want to dob my own little brother in, but you know, a few weeks ago, I was. This is before the lockdown, so it's not like he was breaking the law or anything like that. But
he wasn't a spreader.
He was, you know, socializing with his friends just before things started to get really bad, and I was like, can you not see that this is exactly what you need to not be doing? And at the time, he was like, oh, you're being pedantic, you know, sort of belittling what I was saying. But now, I think anyone, it's completely changed. Like, you have to look ahead for these things and try and anticipate. Like, I knew that it was going to come to a point where you just literally could not have any contact with people that weren't in the same household, because for every one, I think it's like every one person who gets it, the cumulative effect of spreading, I think the average is every person who gets it on average spreads it to either 8 or like 16. I can't remember the exact number, but it's a lot of people. And the cumulative effect of that is you spread it. By the time that it's finished spreading from you, it's 50,000 people. One person can spread it to 50,000 people cumulatively over time, just by going about doing their business, because each person
that's one person going to another person that passes it on, and it's like one person.
And if each person affects like 8
people, pass the 5.
It's a ridiculous amount of cases.
Mate, and that's what it was. I remember when I was working in the hospitals, and the physios were turning around being like, oh, people are making too much of a deal out of this almost. People were almost in disbelief about the effect they could have. And I don't think anyone really expected to be in the position that they were, especially not the healthcare workers.
Yeah, definitely not.
That obviously they'll put in the worst case scenario in their heads, but I was with healthcare workers and they didn't think it was going to be as bad as it is. It's I do pray for them. I do honestly really, really pray for them, and just hope for the best. And the unsung soldiers, people that are working in shops, people that are delivering things to people's houses, like literally fucking.
I mean, you look at the case of our new immigration system that Boris Johnson was selling the praises of in January. This kind of point-based system that we're taking from Australia. You know, all of these workers that we now deem as essential. You know, you've got people who work in supermarkets, you've got people who are cleaning, people who are you know, doing infrastructure, people who, all of these vital services. All of those professions are deemed low-skilled jobs under that system,
mate,
and now they are essential.
Nurses.
Like
nurses, yeah, no, that's what it is. And it's any job that's under £25,000 a year or something like that, isn't it? And the starting salary for nurses is 24.2 grand.
They're not the people on furlough. It's the bankers that are on furlough.
Exactly.
It's you know,
they're sitting back and fucking getting paid whatever they fucking need to, man. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. And the thing is, you only realise it in times of crisis. I hope and I pray. I don't wish any bad to Boris Johnson. I really, really don't. Honestly, I wish him a speedy recovery and just
likewise.
He's literally anyone that wishes death on anyone has to be sick in some sort of way anyway, especially someone that they don't know, let alone the Prime Minister who's trying to support the country at this time. As good of a job is arguable, but it doesn't matter. But it's like, I hope he just comes out of the ICU and realizes how essential and how much these nurses and these doctors and these healthcare professionals are helping him out in this time. And they're giving up all their time, resources, their own safety, their own lives almost, just to be able to protect themselves against themselves. Really, it's a heroic act that few people would actually wish upon.
If you look at
their worst enemy,
nurses, for example, you've had there's quite a lot of cases in this country of young nurses dying from the virus, and that's not supposed to, everyone's like, oh, it's only supposed to be the old people that are getting it, and the reason for that is you get something called viral overload, which is where repeated exposure to the virus makes it more likely that you're going to get severe symptoms. So a nurse who's going and treating 100 people in a day, even though they would normally be fit enough to survive the virus easily and maybe even be asymptomatic, because they're just getting it over and over and over again. And this comes down to a lack of personal protective equipment, which is an absolute shambles for, the fifth richest country in the world. And even at this stage where we're not overrun, it's going to get worse. And we're already having shortages of gloves and masks and stuff. And I remember I saw a news report the other day that was about, it's ridiculous the level of personal protective equipment in some of these places is literally a plastic apron and a mask and some gloves. That's it. And it can enter it can go through your ears, it can go through your eyes, even if it's just on one tiny bit of your body, you need full body protective equipment to be safe from this virus. And there's just a complete lack of that. And we are supposed to be a developed country.
Mate, but that's arguing back to the point of, we can't really say we're that much of a developed country if we have homeless people in the street.
Exactly.
In terms of not developed is the wrong word, because they still have the opportunity to get food, and there's other people that can support them. But you can't say that we are a rich country if the poorest people in the world don't have anything.
That's the main thing that I hope really does come out of this crisis is people need to realise that you are only as safe as the least cared for person in your society. You've got
literally one person had fucking 8 bat soup.
Exactly.
And look what happened in China. Yeah.
The reason that the Chinese people eat these kind of crazy animals that are crazy to us is because historically it's such a poor country that these people, it's become part of their culture to eat anything basically that they can, because there's such a lack of food. They would eat bats, so they would eat all of this you've seen the menus from these markets, it's just hundreds of different types of the most crazy animals. And it was the same with the SARS outbreak. That came from civet cats, which are these little raccoon type things. It's all of all of these things are from these animals that aren't really bred to be sheep. As they exist now in this country, are not a naturally occurring animal. We have bred them over hundreds of thousands of years
they're domesticated, really,
to be the best for livestock. But all of these wild animals are not that, and the way that they're kept. But at the end of the day, the reason that is the way it is because of inequality, because of poverty. And fair enough, 100 years ago that was just the reality of the world. But nowadays, there is the facilities we have, the technology we have to care for every single individual person on this planet, and we don't do it. And without wanting to get too political about things, that's always been my view of these things. That has always been the reason why I am a socialist, is because it's not because I believe in some 20 years ago I probably wouldn't have been a socialist. While the Soviet Union was a thing, and while it was capitalism versus socialism, I think when it comes to that kind of dynamic, I probably would have been more in favour of capitalism from the US than the Soviet Union's communism. But now that's not the case anymore. The technological advancement of the last 20 years alone has made it so that there is no excuse for poverty in this world anymore. We have ample food, ample resources, ample everything we could possibly need to care for every single person on this planet. And
so why is it not
exactly? But the reason it's not like that is because it's not profitable for that to be like that. And there are people who have the money, who have the power, who have the resources, are actively fighting to prevent that from becoming the case.
Yeah, the power of the 0.01%.
Exactly.
Outweighs a majority of other a majority of other individuals. It's something ridiculous like, what was it, like 0.1% of the population has the same wealth as the other 90%.
I think it's the 1% are richer than the rest of the 99%, like significantly richer.
Which is terrifying to even look at, really.
And like, as much as capitalism has done so much to raise the quality of human life as a whole, it's at a point now where that has peaked, and it's actually becoming a detriment to the rest of the world.
We have so much resources, we have so much opportunity that it's almost too much for certain individuals.
Inequality is counterproductive. Like, if anyone is interested in reading further into this that's listening, there's a book by a man called Rutger Bremen. It's called Utopia for Realists, and it's about this. It was basically, you know what the concept of utopia is. It's
everyone's even. It's everyone lives in their own like kind of world of.
It's just like an idyllic society where everything has everything they could possibly want. And the thing is, the book starts off with how 100 years ago, if people looked at what we have now, they would look at what we have now as a utopia. But utopia is relative to the society that imagines it. So our utopia is an advancement upon that. And you have to look at all of these things, like poverty is actually counterproductive to human development, in the sense that how many Albert Einsteins, level of intelligence, that natural level of ability, have been lost through just poverty, because they were never even able to have a normal life in the first place. Like, you know, we have everyone's like, oh, this is where like how racism is such a stupid ideology, because the reason why Europe and America and the West is so advanced is actually because we have the most resources and we care for our populations the best, and there's a greater chance of everyone getting to a point where they can
find those opportunities for every individual to kind of push forward as they need to. And it isn't completely equal, obviously not, but the thing is, fair is such a hard word to pin down almost.
No, it definitely is. I mean, opinion. It wouldn't be an easy feat to achieve that kind of utopia, but the book itself talks about how things like universal basic income, if we just lifted, if everyone didn't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from or how they're going to get a roof over their head, which at the very least is what we should be providing for people. Like,
no, I agree.
There isn't a shortage of resources to build houses, like, but we still have homelessness.
Do you not remember when what was it, Theresa May, when she was just like talking about how Labour was going to spend all their money, and she turned around and was like, oh, there isn't some magic money tree that we can just turn around and spend. But then you look at what's happening now, when they've literally wiped the whole NHS debt away from themselves. They've literally paid off the whole NHS debt within a day.
You know, you had Boris Johnson, who was the whole election campaign was going on saying Jeremy Corbyn is unrealistic, and now they are introducing like the most spending that there's ever been in this country.
Literally, even more money than fucking Jeremy Corbyn was talking about, man. They're fucking paying for 80% of people's wages through the government, every single individual.
And it's like the same with homelessness. Homelessness, there is actually no homeless people in this country right now, because since the virus happened, they've housed every single homeless person in like hotels and in hostels and all these kinds of things. They did that in a matter of 3 days. 3 days, and they said, and you know, Jeremy Corbyn was called an idealist for wanting to do that, like gradually over time. The means to reduce inequality are there. The thing that is missing is the drive to do it. The people.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. You need to have stress to be able to cause things to change, and it's the same in every single facet of life. Really, to be able to grow muscles, you have to put strain on your arms to be able to build and develop the muscle. And things don't change if they're just comfortable and easy and sitting back and not doing anything. It's very interesting to the concept that I was kind of looking at, and it was how everything almost follows the same pattern, no matter what it is. It's the kind of pattern of things own, like what's the phrase they say? You only get diamonds when something about diamonds and pressure, but I can't really remember what it is at the minute. But the whole kind of thought process of it is just nothing's going to change if there's no need for it to change. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And that's kind of what the Conservative government were working with. Even though no one was happy with the Conservative government, no one's happy with Britain. In reality, that election, you could see the frustration that a lot of people had with the government, and a lot of frustration that people had with a lot of things, but obviously not big enough to cause a radical change. Yeah, exactly.
But if, for example, the NHS in this country, that only exists because we had a generation who lived through the most horrendous world war imaginable. They saw that every single family was impacted by that, and that's what this is going to be like. Every single family will lose loved ones from this virus, and every single family lost loved ones from the war. And that generation after the war was the most left-wing generation ever. That, you know, for the 10 years after the war, it was just Labour. And during that period, we created the welfare state. We invented the NHS, which was every single person, regardless of their background, has a right to healthcare. And
I saw ridiculous statistics, and it was something like, do you know how much it is to call an ambulance in the US?
I think it's
how much it costs to call an ambulance.
I can't remember the exact amount.
Yeah, 2,500.
That puts things into perspective of realizing that you can't have a society where you've got some people with so much and some people with so little, because then things like this are always going to happen.
And that's the thing as well, isn't it? It's like, if everyone was a bit more balanced in terms of their welfare and their position, then people would be less likely to be at risk. We've discussed this on previous episodes before, but I was looking at it in terms of individuals that come from a lower socio-economic background have a higher likelihood of having cardiorespiratory disorders, having asthma, suffering from disorders like stress or hypertension, or more likely to smoke. Yeah, a lot of these aspects that can, maybe not back pain directly associated with it, but a lot of things that can be associated with, if you had these conditions and you got COVID, then the likelihood of you actually getting a serious or critical condition of this disorder is highly increased.
But that all boils down to the fact that the lower class people have lower class jobs, and those lower class jobs put them at risk of catching, like, you're a builder or something, you're bound to, breathe in some gases or things like that. Like, you're in construction, you're bound to breathe in something, or, which can give you pneumonia. And then after that, you've got diseases you can't, especially in like countries where there's not an equal health like system, then
we're fortunate.
We're fortunate in England, but people who can't afford to pay their medical bills, those people are just screwed. Like, there's nothing for them. There's no opportunity. They've got pneumonia, they catch COVID, they die, their whole family dies. It's just wiping out the poor. Rich people can pay for these sort of things. Rich people can pay for treatment and medicine.
Sticky, you getting into some sort of conspiracy theory here.
All I'm saying is that Prince Philip has got COVID-19 and he's not fucking dead.
No, all I'm saying is he died in the summer and they're just carting around his dead body. That's what I think.
Well, like a Bernie's kind of deal.
Prince Charles has got COVID-19. He's not dead, right? Why isn't he fucking dead? He's in the age gap where he should be dying. And Prince Philip died 6 months ago, and no one's talking about it. No one is talking about. Right? Hear me out. Like 2 weeks ago, someone, my sister sent me this thing about like this woman who works in Buckingham Palace, right? And she said, "Oh, really sad today. Prince Philip died." Right, I was like, what? That's not on the news. So I looked on Twitter, hashtag Prince Philip death. Loads and loads of people tweeting about Prince Philip being dead, right? Like 2 weeks ago. So I was like, what? My sister was like, yeah, they'll probably just put it on the news like in a few days or something after the COVID-19 thing. Because it was literally like the day the lockdown happened. So I was like, okay, fair enough. Like, it'll be on the news in a few days. 2 weeks later, he's still not announced dead. I know he's dead for a fact, mate. He hasn't been seen in weeks.
Fuck.
He hasn't been seen in weeks.
Really?
But
saying that. No one's been seen in weeks. I ain't seen my boys in weeks. What do you mean?
The homies. In like weeks, he hasn't been seen, right? And all those tweets got deleted. And I saw them myself. I promise you, I saw them.
Fuck. Wow.
Wow.
Mate, honestly, we're living in a crazy time. Everything's being controlled. The Queen made that speech, right? You could tell someone was wrong. I reckon Philip's dead.
I don't know. It's a very, very strange
You heard it here first,
subject,
guys.
kind of
See how
going
set Prince Philip died weeks ago. We know that.
It's written in the stars. But no, mate, there's literally so much stuff, and if you look at anything, it's very hard to say that coincidences are just coincidences in this day and age, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, everything's probably fucking manipulated in one way, shape, or form to be able to benefit one individual over another, or benefit one millionaire over another millionaire. It's a world that we live in. We were talking about before. Me and Will were talking about it's a capitalist world that we live in.
I was there, by the way. I was talking about it as well.
Yeah,
he just didn't answer me. But it is a capitalist world
what were we
we
saying?
live in that I can't remember what I said, or maybe I'll have to listen back to the tape. But basically, Will was saying how capitalism is like was the best choice, and 20 years ago couldn't be lefty. But I fully agree to that. But Will, do you think that a socialist society would work in Great Britain?
It depends how you would define a socialist society. Like, I think personally, for me, socialism is such a broad kind of spectrum. Like, basically anything on the left wing side of the spectrum could be classed as socialist, because it's supposed to be kind of like an amalgamation of capitalism with a strong welfare state. That's kind of how you would describe it. So in terms of, you've got some aspects of communism in there, which would be like nationalized ownership. So you would have like, well, even for example, if you want to look at the national healthcare system, that is technically a socialist institution, because it's a government owned institution that is not run for profit. And anything that is outside of that would be capitalist. So for me, at least, I think a socialist society in Britain wouldn't even be that different. Like, I'm not talking about some communist utopia where,
of course not.
where there's no brand
like
variety.
There's a lot of countries in the world that are socialist that work absolutely fine. I mean, Finland is socialist. I think another Scandinavian country is as well. That they seem to work brilliantly. And I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Finland, like months at a time working and stuff. And people in Finland love life, and they're deemed to be the happiest people on earth. I mean, even though
I've seen that.
It's a very weird society, don't get me wrong, and they all love to like go naked in the saunas together, and they've got some funny, like, they are different type of people, but definitely they are very happy to be peaceful, and I feel like that socialism brings them peace,
Yeah, definitely.
See, I look at a lot of it in terms of the happiest countries, or it seems like the people from the happiest countries in the world are the ones that don't get as involved in foreign affairs.
Definitely.
If you know what I mean.
In Bhutan, which is like a place near India, they base their not off of profit, like their yearly income is not off of money or like success, it's off happiness. They've got like a happiness factor that they base the society off of. It's like really high in the mountains.
Really?
Yeah, it's called Bhutan.
Wow.
It's the happiest place
crazy.
on earth. And you have like I can't remember what it's called, but like per everyone who lives in the country, basically you do like an average of wages and salary and stuff, like to see how wealthy the country is in every country
per capita.
Yeah, but in that country they do it off of how happy every household is.
Oh, really? That's actually very, very
interesting. The country
is
called Bhutan. I'll just double check the spelling for you.
It's crazy. I'll have to look into that. I've honestly never heard anything about that. That's mental.
But
Bhutan is a Buddhist kingdom in the Himalayas. Eastern edge is known for its monasteries, fortresses, or dzongs, dramatic landscape that range from subtropic plains. So it's right at the top of the Himalayas, basically. It's
But mate, that's the thing. If you look at a lot of when I've kind of been looking at ancient civilizations and understanding the plight of the people that are from those, it seems like a recurring theme is money wasn't as important as what it is in today's society, but respect. Something that you can't buy. Happiness as well, something that you can't really buy. You can buy things that make you happy, but initially you have to be happy within yourself to push it forward. And that's the kind of the thought process that they kind of had in these ancient societies, where the most rich people weren't the people that had the most money, but it was the people that earned the respect of everyone else.
So in Bhutan, it's called,
More.
no, you're right, Sonny, and I feel like this adds to it. In Bhutan, it's called the gross national happiness, which is a philosophy that guides the government of Bhutan. It includes an index which is used to measure the collective happiness and well-being of the population. Gross net happiness is instituted as the goal of the government in Bhutan since 2008.
Wow.
Do you think if they introduce that into a Western culture or introduce it into England, for example, do you think it would work?
I don't think so, because the thing is, this Bhutan is such a small nation in the mountains.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just totally different. I don't think people in Bhutan watch Netflix. You know, I don't think people in Bhutan do like, you know, I don't think they do things that we do. So I feel like they don't have much, like households don't have electricity, or they don't feel like they have internet connection. I don't feel like most of them watch telly. So I feel like they're a very small nation who are probably very, very close to one another. And there's probably a big sense of community and collectivism, and, you know, just, I'm sure it's the kind of place where they sit down at night and tell stories to one another, you know. Like, I don't think they get involved, like you said, with national affairs, like, you know. So maybe that's the reason to its success. Also, I feel like it's very religious and very Buddhist, you know. So
yeah, they follow kind of a stricter guideline of the way they should.
It's almost like that whole country
if you have...
is one, you know. Whereas I mean, that's how it feels like anyway.
That's what I like. Sorry. I was just gonna say, that's what I like about religion almost. It's kind of like as much as religion can be manipulated and fucked over in different areas or different circumstances, it has a fundamental of bringing people together and a fundamental basis of unity and oneness.
Definitely.
That there's something that's more than yourself in this world, and some people kind of use other things, like in today's society, if you're nationalist or socialist, being able to find yourself within that group, you find peace within it, and you're able to push it forward because you know what the morals are with them. It's almost like following a guideline to be able to be happy.
Like if you
trying to look for it in
yourself. If you honestly followed Christianity as it actually is in the Bible, I think the New Testament, if you followed the teachings of Jesus and you actually lived your life truly to how he said things, then I think that is a good moral code to live by. But the problem is, you get people who it's like you say, who twist and manipulate things to, like, for example, you have to realize that the Bible was written, it's a product of its time. So there is parts of the Bible
that's been what I've always stood by that my entire life.
Well, I honestly believe that I honestly believe that Jesus was a socialist. Like, when you look at look at the feeding of the 5,000, man, like he just spread it out he spread all that food out amongst everyone. He just like treat everyone how you would want to be treated. That was that's his golden rule. That's like the golden rule of Christianity. And then you've got actually organized religion is the thing that twists that and manipulates it to be like, okay, treat everyone how you'd like to be treated, but if you're a woman who's raped, you can't get rid of that baby, you have to have that baby. Or if you're a man who's born gay, then you have to suppress your inner feelings and never have any feelings towards another human being. Like, that's not what Jesus said. Jesus did not say those things. Like, but people who interpret that religion, they're the ones who do that. And even like the Bible itself isn't actually what Jesus will have said. It's supposedly the people who follow Jesus and their interpretation of it. And there's the reason there's like 6 different counts. Like, all the disciples have their own version of like, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Kind of into it.
Exactly. So they're all going to have their own different interpretations, and they're all going to have their own versions of what he said. But if you really delve deep into the common aspects of each part, and disregard all of the that's a really cool way of looking at things. You know, how there's how many disciples? There's 13 disciples, isn't there? But there's
12, wasn't it? And then Jesus.
That was it.
6.
I think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So What?
Okay.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, 4, yeah.
4.
So
Matthew 1, Mark. So we've got there's 4 books, but I mean, you could probably do the experiment yourself. You know, if you asked 4 people to, you know, recount a story that happened, they'd all be a little bit different in their own way.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
Some would exaggerate more things, some would stress other things, some would forget some things, and some would maybe, you know, exaggerate.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why, you know, Jesus himself never wrote a book. You know, all those, the Bible and everything, they're all written from other people who wrote them on his behalf. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, a lot of people talk about Jesus, but, you know, we don't know what his you know, big motives were at the end of the day. We're reading books that his friends wrote about him, you know. So
exactly.
But they're also his friends wrote about him and then were transcribed from Arabic into Latin and from Latin into English, and it's been transported across the whole world. And it's very hard to kind of pick and choose and understand what's kind of going on from there. There are fundamentals that kind of go through everything, but it's the same as in the Quran, or if you look in, or in any of the mainstream religions.
And
really.
That's something I've picked up on as well a lot, is because I'm so interested in languages and linguistics and that. When I studied Latin when I was like 16 in college, we read this book that was in like Old French, right? And so we were like trying to translate it into modern, like it was like in Latin, some of it was in Old French, and then we were basically trying to translate it. And the whole point of the lesson, the lecture, was for our teacher to like explain to us that translating usually is killing, you know, or is when you translate something that's so powerful and so rich, but it doesn't quite mean the same thing in another language, it's best to learn the language that it was originally written in. You know,
100%.
Because
100%. An example of it is like Don Quixote or something like that, like a written book that's an expressive book that's about it. It's like very different from like writing a cookbook or something like that, and it's this ingredient into this. It's something that has expression and form that was divulged from the culture of the country, and it can't be expressed through British culture if it's a Spanish written book, which is really 100%. Interesting.
Especially a lot of this Greek mythology and Latin mythology and all these things. It's so difficult for us to read it today, you know, and understand, you know, all these stories. But we need to understand that this was their life back then. You know, this is all they had.
Yeah.
This is the language they spoke. So, you know, some things don't make sense to us and never will. And I think the Bible has always been you know, a victim of that. You know,
definitely.
Yeah, big. And it goes back to what Will said in reality, where it's kind of just discussing the point of it going in these different directions and kind of like getting perceived in these different ways.
But it's like, you know, a lot of people think that the Bible was written first, and then, well, the Torah was written first, and then it was the Bible, and then it was the Quran, and they're all pretty much the same story. You know, hit or miss Chinese whispers. You know,
definitely.
Yeah, the as much I've talked about this quite a lot, but in South Park they do an episode where they believe and they can understand that they outright prove, and this is completely within South Park, they outright prove that there is no God, there's no afterlife, whoever it is, everyone would be atheist. And then Cartman ended up going 500 years into the future, and these people were still battling and fighting over what name to call the atheist society.
Exactly. So it's inherent, regardless of whether there is religion or not. People would find something to fight over, to use to try and have power over another individual. That's just like inherent to human nature.
As Plato said, the humans are a political animal. So you know, we're always looking.
We need something bigger than ourselves to fight against, to kind of go for it. And that's almost what COVID is doing to us at the minute, where no matter what religion you are, what race you are, you're susceptible to getting this condition, and we have to fight against it to be able to be as strong as possible. One person fighting against it isn't going to do much, but everyone as a community coming together to be able to support the weakest people in the society is something that can bring us closer than we have for generations, really.
And not only that, but it projects it onto the global scale, because even if, for example, China does manage to completely eradicate the disease, their options are, okay, they either close the borders and never let anyone into China ever again, or they actually try and help the rest of the world out, because for as long as that disease exists in the rest of the world, they haven't defeated the virus, because it can always come back. And it sort of makes us realize that we're all in the same boat, and like, you know, it puts things like nationalism into perspective, that it's just a completely illogical way of seeing the world, because at the end of the day, unless you actually want to live as a truly nationalist country where you have these strong borders and no one gets in and it's about you and your people only, then it doesn't matter, because as long as there is, you know, some country around the world like Iran that isn't doing anything, isn't dealing with things properly, then it's going to get out of hand, and then your people are going to suffer.
I've got an interesting point to put across then. So, of course, I agree with you on what you're talking about, Will. But in terms of nationalist pride, kind of pushing yourself forward, things like when we watch the World Cup, for example, or the Olympics, we cheer for Great Britain or for England because we cheer because it's from where we're from. Would you say that's detrimental to society because it's making me believe that I am English and this is what I should stand for? Fuck the other side. Fuck the French. They're trying to fucking beat me in the World Cup or whatever it is. Do you see it as a negative?
I think that's different, because I think when it comes to things like sport, I think that's like, it's like I'm not. That's because that comes down to like tribalism at the end of the day, rather than like nationalism. That's kind of, I view my side as superior to yours. I identify with my team, and therefore I want my team to do better than yours. And I think that's something that's so inherent that we could never get rid of that fully. And I don't think it's a bad thing in terms of sport, but I just think that when it comes down to stuff like, if that's how you are, if that's what dictates how you treat another human being as a human being, not when it just comes to sport, I think that's when it's detrimental. Like, I don't think, you know, sport, countries competing against other countries in good-mannered, like good faith sporting activities in like competition, but then at the end of it shaking hands and being like, oh, we had a really good game there, that's not nationalism to me, at least. I think, you know, obviously it is kind of, it embraces the identity, and this is what nationalists do. They kind of twist these narratives to be like, oh, you're not allowed to be proud of being British anymore, and then that resonates with people who want to be proud of being British. But at the end of the day, I'm a person who is against nationalism, but I'm not against, if it was literally just a case of I'm proud of being British and that's it. It's not about I'm proud of being British and everyone else has to die or submit to the way that I want to see the world. That's absolutely illogical. But I think it's two very different things. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the way that I simply just, the only reason that I kind of see it in a different aspect is if someone spends the majority of their life believing or watching something such as football, people that love English football with all of their hearts, and they can't wait to go abroad so they can fucking do whatever they want and swear at this or do whatever it is. And even if they watch the game, they can shake hands at the end of it. If 90% of the time they're spending hating that individual and 10% of the time they're spending saying that they're okay or kind of accepting them for who they are, is that not inherently bad in terms of the long run for that person's mentality of how they should treat other people from a different nationality because it's not their own?
I think that's kind of I 100% see what you're saying, but I think in terms of, it's kind of conflating sport and competition with like how you actually treat another human being. Like, it's kind of like if we have a rivalry with, I don't know, like let's say we had a rivalry with France in terms of football, and then obviously there is a rivalry, but like, let's say that exists, and then but that can be about football. If that's all it is, then that's fine, because that's what it comes down to. It's like, my team is better than your team at football, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But I just think in terms of if it then that evolves to England is better than France and all the French people should die, like, that's like,
it's a bit of a line.
Sounds like something you'd say, Sonny.
Fucking hell, mate! Jesus Christ! No, obviously not. But the thing is, in reality, I do get what you mean, Will. But the thing is that I kind of see it is nothing happens extremely radically unless there's a crisis. But things can be manipulated to be pushed forward in one way or the other. if everyone turned around right now, for example, and said, we're tracking every place that you're going, we're putting up all these cameras and we're checking everything that you're doing, you're not going to be able to move a step outside your door without us knowing what you're doing, then I feel like that could be inherently, people wouldn't be able to adjust to it. But if they slowly push things forward by saying, a good example I'll use is in this COVID scare. There you go, like, all right, cool, you have to stay indoors, you have to stay in this, you can do whatever you want, just you have to stay indoors. All right, now that you're coming out, just to make sure that you're not doing the wrong things and you're not interacting with the wrong kind of people, I'm going to fucking track everything you're doing. I'm tracking where you are on your phone, I'm tracking what you're doing with these people, I'm tracking what you're doing with those people. And the slow build-up of almost fear-mongering, but fear-mongering in a different aspect from what it would be for in terms of the football, in terms of supporting your national team or whatever it is. I'm just saying, having the aspect of that anger towards the other team can manifest itself.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if in terms of, you can never really fully, there's always going to be some nationalistic nutter. Like, you can't get rid of that's like I said earlier, that tribal kind of attitude. I think is in some ways it's like inherent to us as human beings, because instinctually we, you know, if you go back to when we were like hunter-gatherers, we lived in tribes, we looked after people in our tribes, and everyone else was alien, was different. And that comes from things like viruses, like illness, because different tribes would have different illnesses and different immunity, and they wouldn't want to be coming together and spreading, because that's how it's like. For example, when the colonizers went over to South America, all of the native South Americans died because of all of our European diseases. And like, that's
did you hear how terrifying it was? Apparently the first conquistadors that actually went over there, they traveled over there and they wrote stories and they wrote these elaborate messages of these beautiful cities that kind of rose from the ground almost. It was theorized, and they're doing with new technology of simply due to the fact that the Amazon's getting wiped out, that there could have been up to 20 million people living in the Amazon at one point. And at the same time in London, there was about 15,000 people living there.
Insane. And then we went over there and a virus just wiped them out.
Wiped them out. Because the next load came over in the next 50 or 100 years or something like that. And obviously the first ones came with all these new diseases, and literally just shaking hands or having sex with their women or whatever it was, probably spread it behind the whole community. It's terrifying. And I do get what you mean, where we have to have that tribal instinct of, these are my people and this is my social community. Like, for example, if someone tried to fight you or tried to fight Stick, I would have more of an inkling to go off and back you, because there's a representation behind it. And it's the same way that if someone attacks my nation, attacking my people, then I have a bit more pride to be able to push myself forward with it. But again, everyone is a nutter in their own eyes, isn't it? There are always going to be people that are on the extreme end of one end or the other.
Like, as much as I'm saying that nationalism is illogical and all this kind of thing, like, I understand that it's not a case of it's illogical, therefore it shouldn't exist. Like, it is a manifestation of certain inherent parts of human nature, and like, as much as that is the case, there's a recognition of that, but then there's also a recognition of, okay, that's the case, but it's also kind of primitive, because now we are so advanced that we know better, or we should know better. Like,
but are we a function of our bodies, or are we, if you get what I mean by that, is our thinking mind the main process to our kind of understanding of the world that we're around, or is it everything else? Are we still primal creatures that kind of are a reaction to our emotions, really?
Well, it's difficult to say, because obviously there would be examples of both, but
what would you feel we're more of in this kind of common day, or what do you feel like you are personally, Will?
Well, personally, I don't know. Personally, I think class myself as separate from those kind of instinctive, kind of primitive tribal aspects in it to it. But at the same time, that's it. Obviously, that's not in every walk of life. I'm a diehard Sunderland fan. I'm a diehard Sunderland fan. I hate Newcastle. Right? There is nothing better than when Sunderland beat Newcastle. It is the best feeling in the world. It is the only thing that I have to hold on to nowadays, is that the last time that Newcastle beat Sunderland, Marcus Rashford was 12 years old. That's the only thing that I repeat to myself on a daily basis, because that's all I have left. So like, there are these aspects that that obviously are like manifestations of that tribal attitude, but it's kind of, as much as you have that within you, when it comes to treating another human being with compassion and recognizing what's best for the human race as a whole, you put that to the side and say, like, I know better because I've been educated, and exactly.
Think about it, and yeah, I get what you mean. Stick, what's your opinion on it?
As Will said, I'm not a primitive thinker, but you know, me as a football hooligan for many years,
You've watched Green Street twice, mate. What are you on about?
Football hooligan for many years, nothing's better than when we get Millwall in the FA Cup. I don't know where I stand on all of that, but I mean, I feel like, going back a bit, the football, the football argument that you were making, Sonny, is very important, because, you know, football is something that a lot of people, especially in England, live for, you know, every game on the weekend, and there's countless films that describe it and show it. And it does bring in a very big sense of nationalism, especially when there is the World Cup and stuff. But I feel like the people who are football fans and who are willing to be like, oh, I hate another team, or whatever. If you're, you know, I say I hate Liverpool because I'm a Man United fan, and Will says he hates Newcastle because he's a Sunderland fan, and
oh no, mate! I promise you Will hates Newcastle.
There are Man United fans that hate Liverpool.
But no, I get what you mean.
But my question to Will is: Will, would you stab someone? Would you stab a Newcastle supporter?
No, of course not. My brother's a Newcastle fan, and I hate my brother. But no,
you wouldn't stab him. You would kill him. So I feel like
no, of course not.
There is I think there's a fine line between being nationalist and nationalist to our country or to our football team, or at least putting your heart into it, and being a little bit more. And I feel like when you're a little bit more, I don't think it's a generality, you know. I feel like it is a special case that exists in England, and that we sort of grew up seeing with films like Green Street and that, and because we've seen the World Cup, and we've been there, and we've been crazy about our football teams. But I do think it's different than just loving our country and being nationalist. And
I don't know. I personally, for myself, I feel like it's more how in control you almost are of your emotions.
That's the thing. Yeah,
all of us are fairly. I don't want to say intellectual, but in terms of like, we all can kind of like rationalize things a little bit better than maybe some other people. Some people that are more just irrational when they go off on their emotions, and they're more just push things forward and don't really think about them. And it's a dangerous game that you can, and I'm guilty of it myself sometimes, where I just kind of just go off the chain, and I'm completely out of whack and out of character. And it's about learning from those experiences, really, because some people push it forward even more when they're like, oh, this is when I can get angry, and some people just express it when they're on the pitch playing football, or when they're doing boxing, or even if they're doing ballet or darts or something like that. It's just being able to control it and be able to release it when you want to. For myself, I would say that I'm a complete victim to my emotions. I'm almost a slave to them.
Are you a slave to them when you play darts?
Oh, mate, when I'm on the fucking dartboard, fucking angry as shit, mate. Only going for that 666.
I hear everyone. That's all I do. At the uni dart society.
You know what they call me around there?
The coal miner.
Call me the coal miner.
I'm not surprised, mate.
The coal miner. That's what they call me. I'm always on my grind. Fox in the box. That's what it is. But no, that's what it is. I think it's because some people just need to let the energy out as well, which is a big aspect of it. Because if it builds up for you for such a long period of time, when it does come out, it erupts into something that you almost can't control. But if you can push it out into manageable chunks, almost, or let it out into something creative, that's when you kind of really rule yourself and put yourself on your own.
Like it's like what you said earlier with
really
with nationalism, like in terms of if that, like, I don't, as much as I was saying that it's a bad thing in so many ways, in terms of our global outlook, and in terms of as a species, if we want to be prosperous and we want to survive, and we don't all just want to nuke each other, like that's one way of looking at it. But then it's like you were saying, in terms of if there's creative outlets, football is a perfect example of something that probably is, if there ever was a positive manifestation of nationalism, it's that. You've got, as much as you've got football hooliganism, you've got the World Cup, when all of those countries come together and they play against each other. But it's kind of one of the most like heartwarming spectacles.
Yeah, it is. Even if we lose, it's so emotional, and I'm able to almost express myself through my feelings. Even
in Russia, like such a horrible authoritarian regime that is got the most atrocious human rights record. Even that is capable of hosting one of the most like uplifting, sort of positive, warm sporting events, where you've got instances like, was it the South Korean fans staying behind and helping pick up all the litter in the stadiums and
helping clean up everything. Yeah,
all of these individual things. As much as they're there out of nationalism, out of love for their country, out of support and wanting their country to do well in this tournament, they're also there because they recognize that common humanity. And it's like, for example, during World War One, the on Christmas Day, the football match in no man's land between England and Germany, that's such a positive manifestation of nationalism in that sense, because they played against each other, and then a day later they went back to bombing the shit out of each other, and it's just like, but they were all there for the same reason, and like on that day there was that shared common humanity, which is, it's just, I don't know, it is
beautiful almost. Yeah, it's beautiful because it's been able to, and it is the perfect metaphor for what was happening in terms of there's so much evil within this world, but the one solace is
definitely
the human to human interactions that we do have, and that's the way that we kind of have to live our lives, in terms of there can be such horrible stuff that's happening in the world, but we can't change everything. We kind of just have to be positive and happy within ourselves to be able to relate to the people that we surround ourselves with. And again, we were talking about what was happening before. These movements, these revolutions that are occurring, have to be because of the individual effort that occurs. If I just turn around and say there needs to be a movement but don't do anything about it,
I suppose that could be a good segue onto Big Bernie bro, Big the bro even.
I was trying that, yeah. So Will, again, you do politics. You're a big Bernie fan.
Burnley. I thought you supported Sunderland.
Okay, go on, Will. So we found out today that Bernie Sanders has actually just dropped out of the presidential race. Yeah, last few hours. So what's your kind of opinion on that, Will?
It's obviously as if anyone who's listened this far knows, I'm a massive socialist, so it's kind of, it is obviously sad to see, but it's, I've known it was coming for weeks, ever since South Carolina primary and Joe Biden coming into the lead. You knew this was going to happen, and I think there's conversations to be had about the strategy that he employed in terms of preaching revolution, and kind of saying this is what we need to do to radically transform the country and take on the corrupt establishment. But then at the same time, he turns around and he calls Joe Biden his good friend, and he refused to take the conversation to the gutter. And I think that is kind of a contradictory strategy in a lot of ways, because on one hand, he says that the establishment is corrupt and they don't care about the ordinary American. But then on the other hand, he also says, but I want to participate in that system, and Joe Biden is my friend, and I will campaign for whoever wins this nomination. And obviously I understand that was in an attempt to not divide the Democratic vote and not to be divisive. That was because at the end of the day, beating Donald Trump should be the priority of anyone with any semblance of left-wing values. But
100%.
It's kind of, we have to look at this now in terms of the people on the left, the people who support Bernie Sanders, the Bernie or bust kind of people, are probably looking at this and thinking, this is it. That was the last honest attempt of someone trying to be a left-wing populist while also bringing the establishment centrist, like left of center people on board with that movement. And they were the media and the DNC, all of these people were so violent and kind of oppressive of that movement that it's kind of proved in a lot of ways that is a coalition that will never work.
which makes sense. But the same way as what we were talking about before, where it's hard because at least he's making the steps to talk about this revolution, but it's what we were saying before. You can't go from 0 to 100. You have to be able to take the steps necessary to go for it. And as much as I agree with a lot of what, like, for example, like Jeremy Corbyn said, he was too far on the other side of the spectrum for actually kind of make the change needed to occur. And it's the same with Bernie. I feel like America is too much of a right-wing country for it to kind of flip over to Bernie's ideas and views. If you get what I mean, it has to be the.
I think if you look at the individual policies and you look at the kind of the popularity of those policies within America, you look at, you know, public attitudes of not partisan, if you're not asking people about politics, but you're asking them individual questions like, do you support a public healthcare system like Medicare for all, universal healthcare? I think it's like 70% of the American population supports that. But when it's packaged as democratic socialism, people are like, oh my god, because so many people have been they've been brought up in this country where there's the Red Scare, where it's like exactly
brainwashed almost.
So it's kind of there are lessons to be learned from that in terms of how we package these ideas and how we present them, because I think it's proven that no one claiming to be socialist or democratic socialist, as Bernie Sanders does, is probably ever going to win, at least in the near future in America. They're going to have to present these ideas without the kind of possibility of being framed as a radical, foaming at the mouth extremist, communist who wants to, you know, like, and because the media just runs away with those things, and the media is so powerful in that country that, you know, like even over here, the media is atrocious, but at least we have like the BBC. And as much as I think the BBC is biased, they're at the end of the day, they're a public broadcaster who is funded, you know, publicly and isn't about profit. And I think that is so much better than all of American journalism, which is for-profit corporate interests like CNN and MSNBC.
But that's the whole kind of like American society is also built around capitalism. So trying to dismantle the foundation of the country is inherently
definitely.
But do you think Donald Trump will take it again, or do you think Joe Biden has?
I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong. Like I want Joe Biden to win, but I am honestly of the belief, I just have zero faith in that man. Like, I don't want to be disrespectful. I honestly think he has dementia. Like, he can't finish a sentence. I'm sorry, he can't. Like,
I haven't studied it enough. But
honestly, I'll send you some videos after this. But there's so many incidents. I'll send you so you can attach them if people want to see that kind of thing. I'm sure there's a compilation. But like,
why do you think it is that no one, no one, doesn't seem like anyone can step up to Trump?
I think the only people that could step up to Trump would be someone like Bernie, because he matches that kind of populist approach of it's the people against the swamp. He matches that kind of rhetoric, whereas Joe Biden, whose whole his campaign slogan might as well be nothing will fundamentally change. That's something that he has said to donors, and that's not going to be a message that sells. That's not going to be a message that's going to inspire people to be like, yeah, let's go and beat Donald Trump. Nothing will fundamentally change. Like, how is that going to inspire anyone? It's just not.
Yeah, it almost flips onto the other side where at least they look at Trump and they're like, look, he knows what he's talking about. He's talking about specific things and pushing it forward. And that's the thing what Bernie was. Mm-hmm. You knew what Bernie's policies were. You knew what kind of guy he was.
So he gave Bernie gave up because he lost South Carolina.
Well, it's complicated. He hasn't actually given up. So this is the specifics. He has suspended his campaign, but he will still be on the ballot in all remaining primaries. So people can still vote for him. Which means that he can still collect delegates. So I don't know if you two know how the Democratic nomination works, but so basically you have primaries, which is an election in every state, and depending on the vote share you get that each candidate gets, they get a percentage of the delegates from that state. So for each state, depending on how many people there are in that state, there's a certain amount of delegates. So like big states like California have a lot of delegates, and Texas have a lot of delegates, whereas someone like Iowa has a small number of delegates. And for the first sort of 7 states, I think also it was probably about, I'm not exactly sure the numbers, Bernie was in the lead. And then it got to, and people are counting Joe Biden out. People are like, it's either going to be Bernie or it's going to be, do you remember Pete Buttigieg? You might not even know who he is. Yeah, but he literally, people were saying it was going to be Bernie or Buttigieg. And I fell for that. I was so certain that it was going to be, and I was certain that Bernie would beat Buttigieg in that instance. I was completely counting Joe Biden out, because in the first few states he came like 5th. He didn't even come like 2nd or 3rd. He came 5th out of the nominations, which is just crazy. But then because of that, he completely avoided media scrutiny for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the race, and then all of a sudden, South Carolina was just the one state where he was putting all of his funding. He spent so much money on ads. And the thing is, because he was Obama's vice president, he has a lot of supporters from the older African-American community in these southern states. And that's where South Carolina is. So all of a sudden, overnight, Joe Biden goes from like 5th place to 1st, because South Carolina is one of the first big states. And he's just avoided scrutiny from the media for the last like 3 weeks. No one was even talking about him. It was either Buttigieg or Bernie.
Which shows how like corrupt the media is, because it can kind of flip the whole kind of like political debate almost to be able to go completely on its head. And that's the thing, the media, especially in America, where you're surrounded by your own little community of people. If you're saying you're from certain areas of, if you say you're from like Texas or Kentucky or whatever it is, if you say you're from a specific area, you get associated with that, and then you get built within the area in which it is, if you get what I mean. So there's like certain aspects and traits that you start to pick up, and you can see it when you kind of talk to people from certain states in America. When they talk to people from certain states in America, all the media is the same, all the people are talking about the same thing, and it makes people believe that that's the right way to think, even if it's stuff like they get Hitler quotes and then they get Trump quotes and then say the Hitler quote and say it was Trump. And
of course, it happens on both sides. But this is the thing with Biden against Trump now. It's crazy, but Donald Trump could honestly, his strategy might be, especially now that the coronavirus is happening and he has like a reason to do it, he might actually try and outflank Joe Biden from the left to try and win over people like Bernie Sanders supporters. He might, because if you look at his proposed bills to tackle the coronavirus crisis, in a lot of ways it's quite similar to what's happening over here. You've got a right-wing conservative government who is proposing these crazy like funding for like stuff like, for example, there's a £500 billion proposal going through Congress at the minute, proposed by Trump, which is to provide universal basic income for the next few months. Universal basic income. That is a socialist idea through and through, and Donald Trump might be about to take complete control of that and say that that was his thing, and that would be $3,000 per person for the next few months. So he might just give all American citizens $3,000, which is crazy.
Which would sway a lot of people as well, because it'll be like, and it's saying what you're saying, because it's the thoughts and ideas without the baggage of
because
what people don't
Donald
believe
Trump's
in.
not being like, so Donald Trump's not saying, I'm a democratic socialist, or this is socialism. He's not saying any of that. So people aren't going to have these ideas connected to it. As far as they're concerned, there's Donald Trump, who is a nationalist and America first and is just caring for his citizens. That's the way he's going to frame it. And you've got stuff like he's put a ban on bank foreclosures for Americans paying mortgages. He's put a moratorium on evictions to sort of help people who are renting. All of these little individual things
really?
are gonna, and then meanwhile you've got Joe Biden on the other hand, who literally a few weeks ago, when asked in an interview, said, someone said, if Bernie Sanders in the Senate manages to get a bill through that is Medicare for all, what will you do? And he said he would veto it. Joe Biden said he would veto Medicare for all. Meanwhile, you've got Donald Trump saying that you've got Donald Trump saying it's unfair that so many Americans are uninsured and is looking to expand Medicare.
Sounds like Donald Trump's trying to be the man of the people these days.
And that's the thing. As long as Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee, it's not even that hard. Whereas if Bernie was the nominee, Bernie would be like, yeah, bring it on, do that. Please flank your way to the left. I'll just go even further left. You can't outflank a democratic socialist from the left, but you can outflank a corporate centrist Democrat like Joe Biden.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, totally.
But saying that, yeah, I'm just thinking about it in terms of, will Bernie be able to run for the next election?
He's 78 already.
I think he'll be too old, to be honest. I think he's allowed. I think I'm not, because there is like term limits. You can only.
I thought you can only run twice for president.
But I think if you're unsuccessful, maybe that doesn't count. I'm not exactly sure of the specifics.
You can run like 3 times, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. I think might be. I'm not exactly sure of the specifics on that one, but for example, Donald Trump tweeted in the last few hours. He said, "Bernie Sanders is out. Thank you to Elizabeth Warren. If not for her, Bernie would have won almost every single state on Super Tuesday. This just ended like the Democrats and the DNC wanted. Same as crooked Hillary fiasco. The Bernie people should come to the Republican Party. Trade."
Mate, it literally. Do you know what it feels like? It literally feels like when Palpatine killed Mace Windu.
It's
and then he was like, "There's been an attack on my life. Please give me like ultimate power."
Yeah.
Like, it's actually fucking ridiculous. Like, he's managed to. God knows how God knows why Bernie Sanders is out. But it's like Trump's like, I can put my feet up now. Doesn't matter. Like, I've won. Man,
I personally can't see Biden beating Trump.
Nah,
I mean, I will happily, if I am wrong in a few months' time, I will come back to this and be like, thank God. But I'm saying this now, and I'm going to come back to it in November after the election. If it is Biden v Trump,
with tears
Trump will beat him.
Is that November this year? Yeah.
Yeah, November this year. Crazy. I mean, unless it's like suspended with the virus and everything, but
I bet it's really difficult for their. I bet they've got to think of like innovative ways of being, campaigning and stuff now, because obviously they can't do mass gatherings. I bet loads of Instagram lives and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Bernie was having these crazy massive rallies every week before all this happened. Like, so much of his momentum came from, bringing people out and bringing thousands of people into convention centers and. Exactly.
So everyone
Joe Biden isn't building crowds of thousands. No one cares. It's all just old codgers who sit in watching CNN all day and are like, "Oh, he was Obama's vice president, and Bernie is a socialist and a communist. So I'm just going to vote for Joe Biden." That's what it comes down to.
Probably a bit more complicated than that, but
there is logic to that, in the sense that the elderly vote is, as much as Bernie Sanders did motivate the youth vote and has increased turnout in the young vote, the elderly vote has just exploded. Like the number of old people voting is like 3-1 to young people still, even though
really
in some states, obviously not in all states, but like.
Of course,
it's crazy.
Man, it's a fucking crazy world that we live in, man. It's a crazy world that we live in, and politics isn't a fucking easy subject.
Good luck to you, Will, for like pursuing in politics, man. Because after 1 hour of that shit, my head hurts, so I can't imagine a lifetime of it.
Yeah, I'll be waking up with nightmares in the middle of the night because of those.
When did you first think, like, oh, man, I really love politics? Like, what made you get into it?
I'm 21, and I think it would have been around the time that I was about 15, 16. So about 5 years ago, and it was probably just around the time, if not right before, Jeremy Corbyn took the Labour leadership. So that was a big factor for me, in the sense that I might have had these views, but I wouldn't have had anyone to represent.
Yeah,
exactly. Like I could have been like really left wing, but if someone like Ed Miliband was still the leader of the Labour Party, then I might not have identified with him in the same way, and I might not have been so passionate about it. Yeah. But all of a sudden I had these views that I've always had, but like I didn't really have the political knowledge to kind of like articulate them. Mm-hmm. I've always kind of been sort of of the viewpoint that we should try and do more to make the world a fairer place and a more equal place. But I just didn't really have the political understanding to kind of say that, therefore, this is what we need to do and that's how we need to do it. Like, whereas when I got to the age of like 15, 16, I started like watching the news a lot more, understanding these things kind of gradually over time. Then all of a sudden, Jeremy Corbyn comes into power. I'm like, oh, let's see what this guy has to say. And I'm like, holy shit, like, this is exactly what I've just always been thinking.
Yeah.
And like, in a lot, and that I'm sure I'm not unique in that sense. Like Jeremy Corbyn was he out of any leader of a political party in Europe, Jeremy Corbyn has the single most votes for like in terms of internal elections. So like more people voted for Jeremy Corbyn to be leader of the Labour Party than have voted for any leader of any political party in European history.
Wow, really?
By a long shot, by like hundreds of thousands of votes. No one has ever motivated
fucking hell, man.
And more people who weren't previously involved in politics to get into politics as Jeremy Corbyn did.
So where do you think it all went wrong for him? Do you think there was ever a possibility he'd win?
He nearly did in 2017, and I think if things had been different, yeah, exactly, Theresa May, bloody hell. But she, like, it's like, you know, if Brexit hadn't been, I think Brexit was the deciding issue of this election, and it's such a divisive issue that there's a problem within the left. The left is a lot more principled in terms of we stick to our own beliefs, and we're less like, and we don't like fall in line. Whereas everyone who was right wing kind of fell in line behind Boris Johnson. Whereas on the left, you had Liberal Democrats, you had Plaid Cymru, you had the SNP. All of these people who voted for those parties are definitely left wing, but they didn't all unite behind the most plausible option, which was Jeremy Corbyn, for a number of reasons. But
I met a lot of people that were Welsh, and Plaid Cymru was a massive influence for them, because they were just listening to it, being like, this guy's talking sense and he's trying to bring back power, because trying power to Wales in terms of, and that's why a lot of people vote SNP as well, just because they see this is our people. It's not just London that people are fighting over; it's fighting over the rest of the UK, which is
I'm half Scottish. My dad's Scottish, and honestly, if I was living in Scotland my whole life, then I probably would also be more inclined to vote SNP than Labour, because I do understand that view that if you're from a different part of the country that isn't England, you are overlooked in so many ways. But that's because even in the Northeast, I'm overlooked in my own country. Like, the Northeast is one of the most neglected regions of the whole country. Like, I come from one of the the Northeast, especially like the places that I've been brought up in, former mining towns, absolutely decimated by Margaret Thatcher, and everything that came after that, and the 10 years of Tory austerity that have happened recently. Or like the places that I'm from are the places that have been impacted most negatively by these things. So I'm sure that plays into my politics as well in a lot of ways, because, you know, like all my granddads and my relatives and all that, they were all coal miners, and I think it's kind of in my blood in that sense that I was always going to be fuck the Tories. But yeah.
That's a crazy story, man. I think that's something a lot of people overlook a lot, you know. The fact that people,
it's
not that long
your
ago,
family history and everything.
People think, oh, look how terrible it was in the war, but we're talking in the 90s, when this happened. It's crazy. No one really tends to think about how much of an impact those sort of things had on, especially the northwest of England. And still nowadays, people are still paying for it today.
Exactly. And then those people have just turned around recently and elected Boris Johnson.
It's such a fucked up mindset. We spoke about that before. Like how the people who are working class tend to be, and it's not a generality, but a little bit, they tend to be the ones who have more difficulties with immigrants and things like that.
Well, Brexit kind of brings out those kind of sentiments, doesn't it?
So they're the people who look at people like Boris Johnson, although someone like Jeremy Corbyn is best to represent them, but they don't understand that.
Because there's people like Nigel Farage who are willing to mislead and kind of change these narratives to be not true, and like they say these things. There are people in this part of the world. I'm currently in that part of the world where I'm in Brexit land. The people who voted for Brexit, but
Brexit land.
They have legitimate grievances about what's gone on in this part of the world. They look around and the government doesn't do anything for me, and they're right. But the problem is they've been misled to elect the same people that put them in that position in the first place, and it's such a shame. And I would never. This is the thing that annoys me, is I do see a lot of people on the left who are kind of disrespectful to that side of the population, and I would never personally. I never join in with that kind of thing. I'm not as much as it's funny to be laughing at all the people who don't understand. You've got people who get interviewed on the news and they're like, oh well, I need to get rid of all of the immigrants, and they're not making any sense. As much as it's easy to laugh at those people, definitely. It's kind of
but it's sad to realise that that's the way they probably grew up. That's the thing they've always known. And just because they've had a less wealthy and less easy education than easier education than most people, we're laughing at them, although they're just uneducated.
And as much as there's a lot of the things that come with that are abhorrent and disgusting and racist, it's kind of like you have to look at who's influenced them to be like that way, and it's the Sun, it's Rupert Murdoch, it's the newspapers, the tabloid press who promote these ideas.
And I think that's what it is. I think because we've discussed it quite extensively, the problems that have kind of been occurring due to things like the media and manipulation and everything like that. Would you guys probably suggest, because I was thinking about solutions to this problem effectively, what are the best way to kind of solve this kind of the problems? And Stick was just saying about how it's education is the problem. So would you just suggest that education would be the solution
definitely.
as well?
I definitely
to think a little bit more independently, to be less like sheep and more like shepherds, to be able to push forward in society and develop it into
education is fundamental, but the problem is it's like all aspects of this society at the minute. It's underfunded, and it's there's a lack of there obviously are brilliant teachers out there who are passionate and they really want to educate the youth and try and make a difference, but at the same time you've got people who are just in that profession because it's what they had to do, and it's kind of apathy in it at the end of the day.
And yeah, completely. And I was just going to say, it also stems from what we were saying before about how the fundamentals of rights can be pushed forward. But even if we agree on a lot of things as three different individuals, but if we all took a class of 30 children and tried to teach them, each of them will come out very, very differently.
You have your own perspective.
Because we have different kind of
how things influence you.
Yeah.
Sonny, if you had 30 children in front of you, you would literally.
So what is the solution then?
Chief Keef.
No, that's what you did. That's what you did
old
in Finland,
SL
mate. That's what you did.
Right, this one slaps. Still, you heard that one.
Oh, no, it's Maribel Bars, and this one, he's one of my boys, isn't it?
Boy, you man, I beg you listen to this nice Maribel Bars. Still.
Yeah. some kids actually start learning.
Reload it one more time.
I'll let you do it. Yeah. But that is the thing, man. I don't know, mate. In reality, what is the solution then? What do you think the solution is?
Fixing the world.
To be able to help people out, to be a bit more
empathy, compassion, and patience.
I 100% agree, but it's how you get that into the psyche when we're all in this
more funding into more. I mean, obviously, I don't know, but I think funding is so important into schools, into activity centres. Sonny, you said it yourself. Yeah. You originally where you're from is very deprived and very not well looked after. A lot of money was put into it by business schools, and now a lot of your friends went off to uni to study business when they probably weren't destined to do that in the first place, but because of funding and things like that. So I feel like that is a solution, opportunities, solutions,
opportunities,
definitely
things like that.
Yeah, for myself, but that develops the selfish mentality.
I think that's an example though, Sonny, of being a business school. It could be anything. It could be anything at all.
Yeah. No. 100%, and I think what I was trying to say was funding is available, but I think they need to fund things into more creative and thought-provoking subjects, almost things like art, things like music, are more important because it's people that can express themselves through something that isn't just a maths equation or a number on a spreadsheet or something like that. Where in your school, that if you do drama or something like that, you're somehow perceived as more of an idiot than someone that does maths or physics. But you might be significantly more talented, and your brain is wired in that way.
I feel like in a lot of these poor places as well, and art isn't. In Manchester, it is, but I mean, really rough places with like small communities, being artistic and being different is very difficult, and
100%. You're not following the trend of what the society believes you to be. Yeah.
No matter what you do. I see it quite well where like my brother lives in France. It's quite rural, and like a lot of people are farmers and stuff, and the people he grew up with are like, I don't know, plumbers or like builders, but a lot of his mates are like those sort of people. My brother's a builder himself, and I see a lot of those people when they realize that I'm at uni doing music and film and stuff. Like it's a world apart for them, because they've got their ways, they've got their life, and it's not.
How do they see it? How do they see you when you say you do?
Like they don't think it's real, Like they don't understand how people can do that. Like they're like, oh, you're on the telly, oh, you do music, blah blah blah. Like it's foreign for them, as like building or whatever is for us, and it's just totally crazy 100%. To think. I've seen all my life, and to a very small extent, but because my brother's been in that had those sort of mates, I've always seen it, and I respect it a lot more now. Because I'm just like, when I was a kid, I thought, oh, they're idiots. They don't understand me. Am I weird? Am I different? They make you doubt yourself. But then you think, maybe it's just people are different. And if I grew up being a builder, maybe I'd take the piss out of someone who's trying to make rap music or trying to make videos and stuff, And I feel like that's
100%. I agree with that. Like, you've got to bring, as much as the education is important, like we were talking about, you've also got to pair that with structural change that provides stability at home. So you can have the best funded schools in the world, but if a kid is going home to an unstable home where there's abuse in the family, or there's drug abuse, or there's they're not going to get square meals apart from when they get free school meals at home. Like these kind of things, but they don't come. That's not coming from educational reform. That's coming from societal reform. That's coming from looking out for the most vulnerable and kind of altering society to make it so that there isn't these people that are significantly treated differently. And you've got.
Yeah, but you kind of have to educate those people to be able to have it. It's like it's a swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Really, you have to educate the people to make them know what is socially right from wrong. But people that don't know social right from wrong don't have the education that's built from it. So it's if they don't have a strong structure from their household, they won't be able to use the opportunities that they
you're
have.
right.
But if they don't have the opportunities they have, then you have to build. It's very hard to kind of find what it is if they're not educated in the right way. Do you have to educate them, or do you have like where do you start? Almost is the kind of point that I'm trying to make. What's the most important aspect to kind of build from to be able to do it? Does it have to start within the household, or do you think that has to start within the society?
I think it's both, but the society aspect to it is probably the most important, because at the end of the day, the people who are teaching you aren't just the teachers; it's also your parents and the people you surround yourself with. So, you know, you can work as much as you can at school and do whatever. Like Matilda, she had the best teacher, Miss. What was her name? Miss Trunchbull. What was she called?
I only remember Miss Trunchbull.
You know, the Honey, Miss Honey, Miss.
The nice one, Miss Honey something. Miss Honey, there you go.
Anyway, Miss Honey was the nicest woman in the world, but she was going home to Danny DeVito, who was abusing her and being horrible. So at the end of the day, like,
yeah, true.
That I think that in a silly like quite imagery way proves the point. You know, you can have the best education at school, but also,
what I'm saying,
when you come home, you're not. It's not the same. So it needs to be an easy balance and stable balance of both.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and that's what the thing is. If she wasn't educated about a different way of life, if she wasn't opened up to Miss Honey, and Miss Honey would never do it. Yeah,
like her brother was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, literally. So it's the debate of. I think that's what it is. I think it has to be the steps going in multiple angles. It can't just be one thing. We have to change this thing as number one, and then this thing as number two. It's a spread of what is actually happening within the society and collectively bringing things together
I think
to
Miss
develop
Honey
things
would
for
be very
better
proud
aspects
of your
for
answer,
everyone. Oh, thank you,
Into
mate.
the chokey.
Oh, that brings a tear to my eye. But yeah, I think we've gone over. I think it's almost been 2
hours now.
I wanted to share
one last message before we went off. This is something that's really personal to me, that I decided to share with you guys on the airways. So basically, Prince Charles is a vampire.
Go for it.
Right? People seem to believe the theory because of like his ancestry records, right? But Prince Charles is apparently directly linked to Vlad the Impaler, who was obviously the inspiration behind Bram Stoker's Dracula, right? So the prince even appeared in Romania's National Tourist Office.
All right.
And he claimed that Transylvania, he said, and I quote, "Transylvania is in my blood," right? And joked about being like the descendant of Vlad the Impaler, which obviously created more conspiracies. But then the prince was offered the title of Prince of Transylvania because of his links to the region and his promotion of Transylvania. So basically what I'm trying to say is I think that Prince Charles is actually a vampire, and that all of the royals, I mean, we've spoken about the Queen drinking blood and eating kids and stuff.
I've seen shit like that. I've seen like conspiracy theories about this mad.
Yeah.
People who think like she eats human flesh and that's how she's still alive.
Mate, we got a whole segment of it on our last episode.
That's crazy. You'll have to send it to me.
Yeah.
I definitely will.
You know, there's a disease called porphyria, right? And it's like common amongst royals, and it's like an iron deficiency in your skin, and it makes people's skin sensitive to sunlight, basically. So apparently all the royals have it because it's in their blood, it's in their bloodline, which you know, vampires are scared of the daylight, so that's why.
It's true. Where are you getting these references from?
Right.
I just want to know.
I found that link on boardpanda.com.
Yeah, what's the name of the website?
Sounds credible, to be fair.
Sounds legit.
Yeah, sounds legit.
It's even got a little lock by the link name to make it true.
Oh,
look, the first one. Here we go. This is today's article on boardpanda.com. 35 hilarious cat Snapchats that will put you a smile on your face.
So that means that proves that Prince Philip is a vampire.
I want to bring on a specialist about royalist conspiracies, Alex Jones, someone like that, who can tell me why the Queen rejuvenates herself. Basically, on the last episode, we spoke about this guy with snake venom who injected snake venom to stay young. And like,
did it work?
Yeah, no, he's like 55 years old and he looks like he's 20.
Yeah, it does.
What the fuck?
I'll send you the link afterwards. But basically, we thought the Queen did the same because she had kids. But I think now Prince Charles does the same. That's why he's got COVID, but he ain't dead. No,
he's got that snake venom in his blood.
Human blood in his veins, mate.
Yeah, human blood. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he does have human blood in his veins. Yeah. Fair enough. Will, are there any final points you kind of want to go across? Anything that you kind of want to say?
I don't know. I just thought maybe. What was your? I know it's quite an in-depth topic, but I was just thinking, what is your actual opinions on this 5G thing? Because I haven't even. All I've seen about it is Black the Ripper was posting about it, and now he's dead. So
rest in peace, my guy, Black the Ripper.
Rest in peace, legend.
R.I.P. Black man.
But like, what is? I don't know. I haven't seen. I've seen that. And I've seen there was this video of this woman going up and like harassing people who were laying 5G cables, being like, this is how people are getting coronavirus.
So I'm not too sure either, right? But from what I know, I've seen a lot of maps of whether the 5G towers are being installed, and they're usually in really, really strong points where, like, dense points where coronavirus victims and notably deaths are occurring.
Fuck. My brother did say something about apparently because it's 5G and it's on the microwave level. Apparently, like it's been linked to like a massive upspike in like cancer, which
I've heard a lot.
Like my brother does science and shit though, so I feel, and he's not normally a conspiracy nuts, and he said that, so I'm like a bit shit.
Yeah. The only thing that I've kind of seen with it is kind of it's a good way to kind of like round off everything, because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with China and all of the CCTV cameras, because apparently China has very large neural network. I don't know if they've got 5G, but they've got something that's probably fairly similar to it. And apparently the way that their network systems like Skynet and these kind of things, they actually all run on this high level network, so they can send mass amounts of information to each other a lot quicker than they would do on 4G. And the thought process behind it is that these people will be able to back it by people in Britain kind of pushing forward these 5G networks, so they can actually run these systems to actually track and monitor people with a lot more accuracy and speed, rather than things that are happening on like 3G.
See, I'm not someone.
Go on,
you finished?
So that's what it is. That's all kind of where I kind of see it going anyway. Is 5G is just kind of like the next step into kind of surveillance and monitoring and going to this aspect of it. But in terms of coronavirus, I don't see
Huawei
it.
Who is it Huawei or
Huawei?
Yeah, that's it. They're the ones who are setting up 5G, aren't they? And they're like really
but
that's a bit.
All my life I've been like I've absolutely been in love with conspiracy theories, right? From JFK to 9/11, like honestly. But this is the first time where I haven't been really super into it, right? But one thing that I do find really, really, really weird that I've never really seen before is that I'm typing in 5G conspiracy onto Google, right? And everything that's coming up is conspiracy theory will not die. Here's the bonkers conspiracy theory blaming 5G. 5G conspiracy theorists are using fears about the coronavirus to make money, right? I've never seen like... if you type in JFK conspiracy theory, it comes up. Pages come up explaining whatever.
So you think it's being suppressed? Like actual ones.
It is.
But it's not that stuff isn't current though. In reality, it's current. I can imagine that straight after JFK's death, and people were writing about, JFK did this or JFK did that, or after the moon landing, people were writing about it. It would be suppressed by the media a lot more because it's
right now. Like we can do whatever we want. Yeah, everything is being suppressed. I mean, it's just weird to think about, like even that David Icke interview
very much
I saw. David Icke, Will.
Yeah. He's actually, I mentioned him in my anti-Semitism video.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
He used to play football as well, you know.
Yeah, because he get an injury or something like that.
And
something happened. He had to cut his career short, or something happened.
So
crazy.
He's made this like 4-hour video about COVID-19, 5G towers, like everything. I didn't watch the whole thing. It's in 2 parts, and both the parts have been deleted from YouTube, and they're only on Vimeo, like this random website. And like I feel like they've been deleted as well.
The thing with David Icke though is he's one of these people who thinks that like Barack Obama's a lizard. Like he literally does think that. So it's kind of like there's conspiracy theories that I find credible, and then there's also
me too.
David Icke level.
Take with a pinch of salt, because he's the kind of guy that thinks that on the Isle of Man there are shape-shifting reptilian lizards that like control the world and stuff. Which, you know, whatever. But David Icke is someone who's written 21 books, right, about conspiracy theories. So like, you know, you gotta think this guy's obviously got some sort of information. Like, you know, he's not just making it. Yeah, I mean, whatever.
Wrong
information from wherever. But I mean, he's still someone who I think is worth a listen. You know, like he's worth.
No, it's just to open your mind and kind of see it from a different angle, because no one knows what's happening, and as I said before, coincidences, especially in this day and age, are probably quite few and far between. You kind of have to take everything with a pinch of salt in this time, where you don't know what's happening in your neighbor's house. So what are you going to know about most people?
If we posted a snippet of this onto YouTube, just like a clip, and we wrote 5G tower conspiracy, I bet you it would be deleted.
Let's test it, and let's get ourselves on that Chinese government watch list, yeah, boys.
That's the thing. Like now that time's passing, and we're talking, and I just said Prince Charles was a vampire. Like I might be targeted. You know, I might just suddenly disappear. You know, who knows?
Well, if we all disappear, then
we died. We died.
I'll make sure Nathan watches this.
We died.
And then if Nathan, when you're listening to this, it's your responsibility to follow up when we're all dead. You're the one who has to be like, they were silenced and killed by the government.
This is on your shoulders, Nathan. Yeah, that's gonna be the one. Shout out Nathan, looking after us in our fucking time. But yeah, no, I think that's
really
a good
nice
point to end on, boys. If I'm being perfectly honest,
I really appreciate it, boys. It's been a blast.
Really good. What's
just
the name of your YouTube page anyway, mate?
IDY.
Perfect.
I appreciate that.
We'll definitely get in contact with Dan, post everything down below, just so people can kind of have a look at it and everything. And but that's what it is, man. It's about spreading the love and like just kind of getting interesting people with interesting topics to talk about. And obviously you go into more detail on your website, so if people are interested, they're more than welcome to have a butcher's over at that. But no, it's been a lovely one. It's been really nice,
looking
you guys.
Forward to editing all this together to see how it sounds. But Will,
I can't wait to hear it.
Will, you're more than welcome
to
join us whenever you want. And
definitely, I'll be back. I'll be back 100%.
You're a great first guest to have. I was surprised.
A pleasure, mate. Always a pleasure.
I'm honored.
And how good and how well you sounded actually. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Really good. Yeah.
Well, I don't think I said anything too incriminating.
That's what it is.
Well, I hope not. But I mean.
Yeah, your brother's gonna come listen to this.
If I go down for my conspiracies, I reckon you two are gonna be down as well.
Do it. Yeah, probably.
Oh man, I'm already in the fucking pit if you go down for anything, mate. Don't worry about that.
Thanks guys for tuning in. If you listened all this way, remember to like and subscribe our page and our channel and all the links. Follow Will and make sure you come back for more tea in the future.
Perfect. It has been a pleasure. It is the 21st. It's 9:25.
It's the 21st.
It's the 21st of 22 at 9. What?
It's the 31st. -1. It's the 18th month of the year. No, it's 9:25 on what is the date today? The 8th